Hello, my name is Eric Tarr. In this video, I will demonstrate how to create a multi-track drum mix using Waves plugins along with Superior Drummer 2. The basic concept is to use the drum samples from Superior Drummer 2 and process them within my digital audio workstation using Waves plugins, just like a multi-track recording. Let me show you how I created this mix from start to finish. The first step is to select the desired kit from within Superior Drummer 2. Next, I switched over to the Mixer tab and changed the output for each channel. This way, I can send each channel to its own track within my digital audio workstation. Next, I went track by track in Pro Tools and set up the corresponding input based on the matching output from Superior Drummer 2. At this point, I have the individual channels routed inside my digital audio workstation, just like a multi-track recording. The next step is to process the individual tracks. Let me show you how I'm using Waves plugins for this. This is what the drums sound like coming straight out of Superior Drummer without any processing. All the plugins have been bypassed. Let me take you through how I created my mix. The first thing that I did is I went through on the individual channels and inserted a plugin that's going to simulate having my drums go through an analog console. On some of the tracks, I inserted the NLS channel using the Neve setting. On other tracks, I used the Sheps 1073 model. Next up, I'm adding a plugin that's going to simulate having my drums being printed onto tape. I'm using the Kramer master tape to add a little bit of that tape harmonic distortion. Next up, I'm using some plugins for compression. On my kick drum, I've got the DBX 160. On my snare, I've got the CLA 76. On my toms, I'm using the Puig Child 670. On my overheads, I've got the CLA 3A. On my room mics, I've got the CLA 76 on all buttons in mode. Next, I've got some plugins that are going to do some equalization. On my kick drum, I've got the Puig Tech Pultec style equalizer. On my snare top mic, I'm using the API 550B. On my snare compression parallel compression channel, I'm using the Kramer HLS. My hi-hat, I've got the Q2 to roll off some lows and some highs. On my overheads, I'm using the CLA Drums Signature Series plugin, just the spectral processing here. Then on my far room mics, I'm using the Renaissance EQ4. And on my auxiliary kind of distortion channels, I've got the SSL EQ and API 550A. Next up, I'm going to use some plugins that are going to do some overall processing to the signals. On my kick in mic, I'm using the Jack Joseph Puig Signature Series kick in settings. My snare bottom, I'm using the SSL E-channel strip, so I've got the compressor and the gate working together, along with some equalization. On my toms, I've got the Eddie Kramer Signature Series plugin. On my ambient mid microphones, I'm using the One Knob Brighter. Next up, I've got some extra processing going on some of the channels. So for instance, on my kick out microphone, I'm using the R bass to really add that extra thump to my kick drum. On my toms, I have an expander gate. On my overheads, I'm using S1 to widen the stereo image. On some of my room mics, I'm using a de-esser, more as a de-harsher here. And on other room mics, I'm using Wave Center, some mid-side processing to take out the center, widen things out by just keeping the sides. Next up, I added some reverb. Here I've got a mono reverb and also a stereo reverb. So on my snare drum, I'm gonna bus this over to a mono auxiliary send. And here I've inserted Waves IR1 convolution reverb. I pulled up an impulse response that I liked. I'm just gonna blend in some of the reverb there on my snare. Then for my overheads, I'm adding in a stereo reverb using the Manny Marroquin reverb here. I pulled up a plate setting that I thought sounded great with the mix. Now I'm gonna do some special routing within my digital audio workstation to do parallel compression on my full mix. So I've got the main tracks being bussed over to my clean auxiliary track. Then I've got a parallel mono compression track and a parallel stereo compression track. So for my kick drum and my snare in mono, I'm going to squash them using the Kramer Pi compressor with a low threshold. Also on this track, I decided to add a little bit of extra excitement by using the Butch Vig vocals, where I'm adding that solid state harmonic distortion and a little bit of top end air. Next up, on my stereo parallel compression, I'm using the API 2500. This is for my overhead and room mics. Also on this channel, to add a little bit of extra excitement, I'm using the Apex Oral Exciter as another way to just add that extra flavor to my parallel channel. Lastly, that brings me to my drum bus. I've got everything summed together. First up, I've got the NLS bus plugin on the Neve setting. Then I'm using Kramer tape again to add just a little bit of that extra tape distortion. Now I've got the Vitamin plugin here for extra excitement. That's going to be followed by the SSL comp for bus compression here. Next up, I've got the HEQ using mid-side equalization. So I'm really going to focus the low end to the center and widen up and brighten up the top end. Lastly, I'm using the L2 to perform some dynamic range compression to make sure that my whole mix doesn't clip. Let me go through and A/B this back and forth so you can hear what it sounds like without any processing, and then bringing all the plugins back in. There you have it. I've demonstrated how to create a multi-track drum mix using Superior Drummer 2 along with my favorite Waves plugins. Take care, guys.